Well, good afternoon. And once again, I would like to thank Margy and Jack Flynn for this ongoing series on constitutional government, constitutional law. And welcome. Thank you, Jack and Margy.
Thank you very much for having us again. Good to see you.
Yes.
It's great to see you. I'm Kathleen Dudley. And today, we're going to follow up on a 2-day conference seminar that Jack and Margy did last weekend on constitutional law on affidavits. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how that seminar went and just give us an update, please.
You start.
I would have to say, in all honesty and modesty, that it went very, very well and swimmingly. We had a lovely group of people. Probably we had 30 odd people. I didn't get the exact count. I haven't looked at it yet. Been too busy. But everybody there was focused and interested and committed to standing up for their rights and the rights of their neighbors and fellow citizens. That was a very auspicious start. They were from multiple different states, came to Arkansas, which was nice so that we didn't have to travel. And they were ready to learn about our affidavit process and how the affidavit can be used to have a redress of grievances to errant government. And eventually, if the matter goes forward, can be used to support a lawsuit if one so desires. So we stuck to the basics. We gave them a little bit of an introduction about who we are and what we are and why we do what we do. And then we jumped right into aspects that they may not have been familiar with, such as how prosecutors do unscrupulous things all the time, suborn perjury, prosecute innocent people knowing that they are innocent, and many other nefarious things that they do, which courts can, believe it or not, have actually upheld without blinking an eye. And none of these decisions that we cited are what we would call lawful decisions because they're all unconstitutional. They absolutely obliterate due process of law. So we emphasize the absolute importance of due process. I mean, this is something that is far and wide. It's much broader and deeper than people even realize. So
Margy, could I interrupt you for a second? Could you explain what due process of law is? Because I don't think it's something we really understand.
No, I was going to say, so that's why we emphasize what due process is. Due process is something that it's an orderly opportunity for communications to go back and forth, for a client to have consideration by, say, his attorney, if he has attorney, for a citizen to have consideration by the court or by an opposing party. Let's say you have a dispute with your neighbor. You wouldn't know anything about that, but let's say you have a dispute with your neighbor. Due process involves one of you informing the other about the dispute. And from the very beginning, there should be openness and honesty and a genuine willingness to come to some type of resolution that's beneficial as much as possible for both sides. Due process means that when you go to court, the judge allows you to present your evidence, your testimony. He doesn't tell you that because of Rule 2051 AZ 3 to 4th power, you can't do that, and it's a Tuesday. And unfortunately, the rules of the court have been used by the powers that be to disparage testimony and evidence that the average citizen would want to present in their defense, or perhaps to assert their argument if they're prosecuting the case, and they get kicked out. Oh no, you can't do that. And all of these little sidebar things are all violations of due process of law. From the very first notification right to the last of the decision, due process has to be upheld. And if a court denies you due process, that court forfeits the jurisdiction that it presumably had, because it's made itself a constitutionally defective and a constitutionally incompetent court by the judge's action. That means that court is not fit to hear any matter for anybody until the constitutional anomalies and violations are stopped and corrected. That's how important due process is. Any decision that's arrived with a lack of due process in the court is a nullity. It has no lawful force and effect. And this is something people don't understand. People have come to us for years telling us what happened in this particular situation or that one. And when we, assess their circumstances, we say, well, gee, you didn't get due process of law. Well, what's that? Well, your rights weren't upheld. You weren't informed of this. They had ex parte hearings and you weren't included. That, you have a right to know everything that's going on. All of that is part of due process of law. And due process is covered, obviously in the Constitution. They always cite the 14th Amendment. But due process involves much more than what the 14th Amendment says. Because in every aspect of our rights that are guaranteed, the ones that are actually set forth and the ones that are not enumerated but assumed to be ours and presumed to be ours, there has to be a fair demonstration that you were given all the benefit of due process of law. So if you don't have information that's germane to your case, that's a violation of due process of law. If you're not allowed to interview people who say that you've done something when you haven't, that's a violation of due process of law. It shows up in many different ways, but the bottom line is it's the proper handling of a case pursuant to the Constitution. So if your judge doesn't act pursuant to his oath, that's a violation of due process of law. If he denies you evidence or testimony or limits what you can say, that's a violation of due process. If he interferes with the jury, telling the jury what they should or shouldn't do, that's a violation of due
Definitely a
process. Okay?
violation of due
All of these
process.
things are violations of due process of law. So when I say due process, it's a huge, huge thing. Not one or two things, it's huge. If your rights, if somebody stops you and they arrest you and they don't read you your rights, that's a violation. If they search your car without a search warrant, that's a violation of due process. It goes on and on and on. If you're not allowed, if somebody takes you to court on a traffic ticket and the police officer doesn't show up, you have a right to move to dismiss because you have the right to confront that police officer. And if he doesn't show up, that's a violation of due process. So it's a big one, huge.
The sum and substance of due process, and Margie gave a pretty good explanation of it. For the sum and substance for newbies, new people taking a look at this, it's any violation of the Bill of Rights, any violation whatsoever of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution itself. It covers it all.
So if you don't even know about due process of law, then you can't be educated about all the rights that are being violated.
That's correct.
I mean, the ignorance of the majority of us is tremendous. So
Yes, it is.
we are stomped on, we are treated in ways that are absolutely egregious, and
Yes.
we do not even know. All we know is that we are bad.
Yeah, that's because that's what they make you feel. If you dare ask a question, they look at you like, what's wrong with you? How dare you challenge my authority? Well, excuse me, but you work for me. And I want to know that you're upholding your oath and you're upholding due process of law in all aspects. So I'm going to ask you any question that comes to my mind, and I'll do it respectfully because I respect the court. And I expect you, as the keeper of the court, to respect me and my rights. See, people have to learn to come right back without being nasty, but be a little bit belligerent and asserting their rights, because if they don't, they won't get any. It's that simple.
We respect the constitutional court, but we do not respect the domestic enemy communists who operate the unconstitutional courts.
And they are not the court. They are the people that run the machinery of the court in governments, but they are not the court. The judge will say, my court, it's not his court or her court. That court is a court of the people, because it's supposed to be a place where the people can come and bring matters in controversy to an unbiased individual who is going to hear both sides, allow evidence and testimony, and then, if there's a jury, we just tell the jury, focus on the evidence and the testimony. If there's no jury, they'll adjudicate based upon the preponderance of the evidence. That's simple. But people don't understand that unless they express this to the court from the very beginning, the court will do everything it can to ignore what due process of law really means and just shuffle them through and find against them.
That's why in the very beginning of any action, whether it be a hearing, a trial, whatever it is, even an arraignment, as soon as the judge convenes the court, he'll look at the prosecutor or the US attorney, whoever's representing the opponent, and ask that idiot if he's ready to proceed. And that fool will say, yes, Your Honor, the government's ready to proceed. And then he'll look at me, the judge will look at me, or Margie, or whoever's speaking for our action, our cause, and ask if we're ready to proceed. We say, no, not at this time. And it's never Your Honor, because as we said before, there are no titles of nobility in America. No, not at this time, sir. Okay, ma'am. You have to know the difference because they both wear the black dress, you know. You
can get in trouble.
you talk about dresses. Well, here are guys wearing dresses. I mean, it's pretty absurd. Anyway, we say, no, not at this time. We have some matters to clarify before we go further. That is our right under due process of law. We have to be fully informed by the court regarding our rights. So if the idiot on the bench or the domestic enemy fool on the bench was nothing more than a dictator or a communist and not the friend of the people, if he doesn't know us, he'll say, go right ahead, okay? And we say immediately, you and the US attorney have taken oaths to support and defend the Constitution. Is that correct? Again, we make a statement based on truth, fact, law, and evidence. That's the only way we go in court. All our statements are based on truth, fact, law, and evidence. Then we ask the confirming question, is that correct? And if he's never heard this before, he's going to answer yes if he's not a complete fool. Or if he tries to get away with not answering it, we have a way to counter that. Okay, so let's say the guy says yes. Then we say, with all due respect, you and the prosecutor are required to abide by those oaths in the performance of your official duties, especially those duties before this honorable court. Another statement based in truth, fact, law, and evidence. Is that correct? When he says yes to that, we've essentially won a case. Because we have essentially, not officially, but essentially converted that court from the corrupt, treasonous communist court that it is into an article-free court in which the Constitution is the rule of that court. So anytime the judge goes against the Constitution in any way, or goes against due process of law in any way, or whether the attorney does it in any way, we call him back to that position. So in doing this, we're upholding due process of law for ourselves and for the Constitution and the rights guaranteed therein. We've been very successful doing that. Our people are very successful in doing that. Now, when a judge hems and haws and tries to distract or fabricate or say, hey, I'm not here to answer questions. Yes, you are here to answer questions, okay? You got to give it right back to these idiots. You can't back away from it. If he doesn't want to answer, we'll say, look, there are two situations as we see it. Number one, you haven't taken an oath, which means you have no authority to serve in that position. Number two, if you've taken an oath, by your answers and your evasion and distraction and not confirming the fact that you've taken an oath, you will not abide by that oath in the performance of your official duties. Therefore, by your own actions, you have declared this court without jurisdiction, and any court without jurisdiction is constitutionally incompetent, constitutionally defective, and has no authority or jurisdiction to hear any matter. You are disqualified, sir, step down. And we specify that right away. And if you don't do that, you will lose. Now, I can tell you, and we've heard this before, Margie and I and our students, over the decades now, this didn't happen in 2 years. This happened over,
Long time.
almost 70 years, okay? But Margie and I and our true students have won thousands of cases against corrupt governments and are still winning them. There've been 5 or 6 that have won recently, and we're not even dealing with those people. They'll tell us, they'll call us up and say, hey, I want a case. I did this, I did that, I want a case. We're not even involved in it, okay? So if you want to go to court and you think the court is going to protect your rights, you're a fool. I'm telling you, you're a fool. You have to really take a look at the reality in which we live. You have to understand that the courts are criminal, they're unjust, they're corrupt, they're operated by domestic enemy communist wars. They're no good. If you think you can win against that, good luck to you. If you don't hold them to the standards we do, good luck to you, okay? I can tell you the vast majority of people, if not 100%, lose if they don't use this procedure or something very similar to it. Because if you don't hold a judge to the constitutional mandates mandated upon it, okay? By Article 6 of the Constitution, which says you're an oath taker, you're bound to the Constitution by oath. You must protect the Constitution and hold the Constitution supreme to any other form of law whatsoever, including that which is in the Constitution itself, and that which is in state law, and that which is contrary and violates the Constitution. Very simple. But if we don't get back to simplicity and directness and challenging, we're not going to do much of anything as a society.
And of course, that last statement goes to the fact that amendments have been passed that are not necessarily constitutional. That's why we say, if you look at what it says, notwithstanding anything else in this Constitution and any other law. Because most people don't understand that just because something's written down in a book of statutes or codes or regulations doesn't make it a valid law, because it may not comply with the Constitution in letter and spirit. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't have the weight of law. So knowing that going in gives you a little bit of an edge. And knowing going into, say, a court situation that the judge has a duty to keep order in the court. And part of that has to do with the judge telling you, okay, answers to the questions that you make. Now, I'm not saying they're ridiculous, frivolous questions, but something that is germane to the case or germane to your ability to express yourself. The judge has a duty to make sure that you understand or comprehend what is going on, because you can't possibly have a fair trial or hearing if you don't comprehend what's going on in front of you. So it's his job to make sure that you do. So when a judge says, "Oh, I'm not here to answer your questions," I'd say, with all due respect, sir, you most certainly are. You are the keeper of this court, and it's your duty to make sure that every party to this action has a full comprehension of what's going on. And that's part of due process of law, to which you are duty bound, and you must uphold pursuant to your oath. Just something like that with a nice smile. And they really don't know what to say when somebody says something that is like a slam across the face, but they smile. And you're not ranting and raving and throwing things. You're saying it nicely and graciously and politely, but firmly. And they realize, uh-oh, I got a live one here. She knows about due process. I'm going to have to watch my P's and Q's. In fact, remember, there was a fellow who came to one of our seminars many years ago in Massachusetts who had lost his home. He was out of his home on a foreclosure, and they got cheated. He really wasn't even behind. It was a mixed up, one of those fraudulent mortgage type of things.
Oh, yeah.
And he was desperate, and he came to us during one of the breaks and asked us if there was anything that we could do to help him. And we said, well, have you used the Constitution? Well, not really, he was definitely, on the fence, on the ring side fence, just falling over. So we said, well, what we would do, and we told him what we would do. So he said, well, I guess I could try that. So there was a hearing coming up the following week, and he went to the hearing, and he held the judge to 1A and 1B, okay, identified himself as a premium on the land, and then basically told the judge that he was entitled to due process of law, and he hadn't gotten due process of law because the way this was handled or whatever. And the judge hesitated for a little bit, and then he looked around and said, well, normally, you do things a little differently. But this gentleman has raised some issues, and because of that, and he ended up making the bank take the new locks off the house and putting the old ones in and giving him his keys back, gave him back his house because he had been taken away without due process of
And
law.
title.
And the title.
The
to home as
title
well.
was, the bank stole the house, and the bank had to convey the house back to the guy, okay? I forget his name, yeah, but he came to one of our seminars in Massachusetts. After
Carl
this
something.
fact, yeah, after
Carl.
this fact. And he spoke to the group, and he told the group what happened, and they were rather shocked because no one does this. I mean, the reason why Margie and I and our people win is because we do that which no one else does. We stay with the Constitution. We stay with the power and the authority of the Constitution. We don't go into statutes, codes, rules, and regulations and federal nonsense. We don't touch that. Because for every statute you can cite, they can cite 15 that oppose it, okay? Or the statute could be, quote, interpreted in a certain way, which is totally unconstitutional. The Constitution cannot lawfully be interpreted. It says what it means what it says. It's written in English. If you understand English, you can understand the Constitution. Very direct. In other words, there's no comeback to the Constitution. It's very specific, it's very direct. Whereas statutes are not that way. We stay away from statutes. Plus, as we mentioned before, in an earlier program, since the Act of 1871, everything is a corporation. Everything's a corporation. I mean, the town you're in right now is a corporation. The state you're in is a corporation. The same here. All across the country, they're corporations, right? Well, corporations issue law that protect the corporations. Those are the statutes
And they're
that
not
are
law.
out there. And they're not law at all because they oppose the Constitution. And if you go to Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, all legislative authority is vested in Congress. It's not vested in the administration. It's not vested in the judiciary. It's in Congress or your local
Yeah.
legislative body.
Right, city
So-
council, whatever.
So any legislature that creates law must create law that is constitutionally compliant specific to the Bill of Rights, or it's not law. And 99-point-something% of all laws in this country are totally and completely unconstitutional. So we don't touch that. Other people do and they lose. We don't touch it and we win because it's based on the power and the authority of the Constitution. And this is what people must understand.
See, that's your bedrock. The other stuff can come and go, can change at a whim, and the interpretations are multiple. The Constitution, as the supreme law, is the foundation. What is written in that Constitution are the only authorities that government in any form has. That's it. Now, they stepped outside and they started creating things extra constitutional with the excuse that, well, you know, they couldn't have thought of this circumstance. And so they micromanage to the point that we've got millions of statutes on the book, and most of them are unconstitutional. So people have to rein that back in, and they have to go back to the supreme law, the foundation, the basics. And whenever they come up against any type of officious authority, and I'll put that in quotes, they have to hold that authority to the Constitution by the oath that binds them to the Constitution. That's what we emphasize in the beginning of the seminar. So let the people know that they have not only the right, but the duty to correct government when it errs.
And the
Because
power.
some people would say, well, are we going to get in trouble if we do this? Oh, wait a minute, you're not doing anything wrong. You're upholding the law. They are violating the law. Oh, and their entire demeanor changed because now they've gotten some kind of permission. And even though that's not the full self-authentication that they need to have, it's a step in the right direction because we wanted to empower them with their inherent political power. And we made a big case of doing that too. We kept repeating it. You have the authority, the lawful authority, the inherent political power to hold your government to a constitutional standard, and if it fails, and that is errant government and it needs to be corrected, altered, or removed if the case goes that far.
But Margie, you know, what you're telling us, and Jack, what you're telling us is that we have a lot of power.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we have a
Imagine-
tremendous amount of power.
But how many of us actually are used to stepping into our power? I mean,
Not many.
Do you want an answer to that, a legitimate answer?
Yeah.
1,000 of 1%.
what,
1,000
Yeah.
of 1%.
Probably about
All
right.
right. And that's being generous.
Yeah.
All right. It's less than that.
And that's not coming from arrogance. It's coming from the way it is. And we go back to the conditioning and the programming and the disempowerment that's been basically pasted over every human being on the planet because they don't want us to know of our inherent power. They don't want us to understand the strength and the power of the Constitution. And if we merge our inherent power with the governmental power that is inherent in the Constitution, we have the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. And that is terror to the powers that be. Absolute terror.
I must tell you that when I was in court and I had to present to the judge the very statement, Jack, that you expressed, you know, that you took the the oath to uphold the Constitution. And did you take this oath? And he wouldn't answer. I then had to go to step B and read him the Riot Act. And I actually told him that he must therefore step down.
Right.
And I must tell you that I was kind of looking around at myself going, you just said that to this black robed, black masked judge that's sitting before you. And it was a very amazing moment because I didn't get picked up by my collar and thrown out of court. But in fact, he ultimately then answered yes, that he did swear to uphold the Constitution by taking that oath when he took office. And well, I thank you both because of course that was through your tutelage and direction. But had I not done that, I would be still quivering in my boots and not having any inkling that this system of unlawful rules and policies and opinions and are just that, and that they do violate our birthrights and
All the time.
all the time. And every time we are silent, every time we submit, whether it has to do with wearing a muzzle or getting a needle or a test or any of these medical procedures, when we submit or are silent, we give them our power. And so to stand in our power and actually resist or come educated enough to know how to hold them to our constitutional rights, that's quite an experience. And I must take this moment again to just thank you both, because you are helping us become empowered, and that education that you're bringing forth for all of us is just it's tremendous. And thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
I'm
for
glad
saying
you
that.
used that. Now, keep in mind a couple of major cases. Miller versus United States. The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. Anytime you say, well, here, I'm in court, I just challenged this judge, I'm not being arrested. What you did was claim and exercise your rights guaranteed in the Constitution. That cannot be converted into a crime, okay?
A very good point.
Yeah,
Remember, we mentioned the Ninth Amendment as being sort of a blanket that basically endows us with all of the rights that were not enumerated, because we could think of them all. Well, that kind of falls onto that, because you have an unenumerated right to expect that a man sitting on the bench, serving as a judge, in your case, has taken an oath and will abide by that oath in the performance of his official duties, because that's what due process of law requires pursuant to the Constitution.
and when you have due process upheld and your case has merit and it's well supported constitutionally, you win. Why? Because this idiot is upholding due process of law. He's not upholding scams, frauds, shams,
Favoritism.
nepotism or anything like that. He's required to uphold your rights, to uphold your due process of law, okay? And if he does that, and if he's committed to doing that because of your positions that you brought out to him, that put him right on the hot seat, right? If he's not stupid, he's going to uphold your due process of law and you're going to win. So usually in most of the cases, I mean, the vast majority of cases, we win pretty much within 2 minutes, okay? Now, a little more serious case might take 10 or 15 minutes, okay? Something really involved might take a couple of days, but we win eventually because we're based on the authority and the power of the Constitution.
And we keep the judge there.
Yeah, and
Right
these
there.
these other people, they think they're doing the right thing. I can't blame anyone if he thinks he's doing the right thing, but for God's sakes, if you're not winning, come back to the Constitution, okay? Or take a look at the Constitution if you never had. Because again, If you're based in statute, that's corporate law for the benefit of the corporation, not for the benefit of the people. And corporate law works against you. The Constitution works for you. So please take a look at the Constitution and do yourself a favor.
Yeah. We're very, very clear. Thank you on that. Well, I wondered if maybe we could segue into talking more about the affidavit.
Sure.
The affidavit that you both put together and sent out and has gone viral, and is helping the airlines, pilots, and many more of us, of course. But if you could maybe talk a little bit about that and explain the affidavit again and how we can use that.
Okay, the affidavit, we basically call it the affidavit that speaks of get the kill shot or get fired, okay? Which was put out by the communists occupying the White House. It's not a lawful order. It's not even an executive order, and it's not even in writing, okay? Nothing. It's nothing in writing. If you research John Rappaport and other sources, they will tell you it's not in writing. Go to the Congress and see if it's in writing. It's not in writing. So this is a fraud committed by a fraudulent governmental system that is used to perpetrating fraud upon the people. But the people have always upheld the fraud, always. We're hopeful now that enough people are waking up to recognize the fraud and say, hell no, I'm not going to do that. It's like years ago in Vietnam, I came out with a phrase, hell no, I won't go. Or, hey, LBJ, how many kids you killed today? Came out with a lot of those phrases. Because we were fighting an unconstitutional war that I knew would create communism. Well, here we have communism in Vietnam. That's the objective of the United States, to create communism. Okay, so let's get back to the affidavit. Because of this phony, unconstitutional order by the fake guy sitting in the White House, and he's not even in the White House, he's on set somewhere, at least 80 million Americans can be affected. Okay, it could be higher than that. It could be as high as 110 million. Because we're talking an entire workforce of adults in this population in our society. Well, the order says that all people who work for a corporation that employs over 100 people have to be jabbed. They have to take the shot, right? Well, where's the order from the government to the corporation? Where's the written order from the government to the corporation? Doesn't exist. And if it does exist, the question is that order law? No, the order is not law. Why is it not law? Because the executive department does not have legislative authority. The executive department has executive order authority, but that only pertains to the executive branch of the government and is not binding upon corporations, is not binding upon the American people. So the whole thing is a scam to begin with, all right? Now, go ahead, Mark.
I just wanted to interject a point. What they've done, right? They're trying to pull a double fast one because they're trying to use OSHA to be the strong arm by implementing regulation that OSHA will basically impose upon the corporations. But nothing has been done in that direction. There have been no OSHA regulations put together so far that would implement this executive order. And I think it's because they know that there is growing awareness among the people that the executive order doesn't apply to the people. It doesn't have any teeth. And there's also been a revelation that these companies are being basically extorted. They've been told, and it hasn't happened, but they've been told that if they don't go along with these mandates, that they're going to be fined $14,000 a day per incident. And it continues to grow from there. Now, nothing like this has happened yet, but that is extortion. And the companies in turn are extorting employees when no such law or regulations have even been handed to them. So if you look at it, it's a deceit within a deceit within a deceit. And once the people figure that out, they can challenge it and demonstrate that there is no lawful authority for any of this to take place. It has no teeth. And if the people understand that, they hold these clauses to the Constitution.
So
Because
but
protection.
let me interrupt you for a second.
Go ahead.
So, it seems to be, it's a little bit like two cars playing chicken on the road,
Yeah.
and the one is coming at you and you don't pull away, but they say you have to pull away. And so if you pull away, then you end up essentially losing, but you keep your life,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So life is, in this case, your job, but you lose your life because you get the jab and then you suffer the consequences from that.
Exactly. And there'll be no help for you. There'll be no help for you because your insurance will drop you. Your company will say, no, you didn't qualify, whatever, and you're just SOL, as the kids would say.
Look, the bottom
Bad
line
news.
is you cannot trust the American system at all.
No.
If you want to understand that, you really want to understand that, speak to any Indian in this entire nation,
Native American.
any one of them.
Yeah.
They'll tell you exactly how you cannot trust the government. Talk to the German people, they'll tell you the same thing, okay? And the American people who are aware can also tell you that you can't trust a duplicitous, fraudulent liar. And that's all this government is, a duplicitous, fraudulent liar. It's a private corporation. It is not a government. A true government operates under the authority of the Constitution. This government does not operate under the authority of the Constitution. It doesn't enforce the Constitution, but it enforces communism upon the people. Well, that's a treasonous government. That's a communist government. That's a criminal government that has no lawful authority to even operate in government, okay? So we have a privateer, renegade, out of control, criminal government operating in the United States of America. And the American people, guess what, have supported that from the very beginning. So you've got to look at yourself. You've got to look at the American people who have supported these criminal enterprises called governments over the past, 200 some odd years.
But you're asking us, Jack, to step up in ways that most people don't have a clue. We haven't been asked to step up before. And now what you're saying is not only do we have to educate ourselves in the Constitution, but we have to develop a voice and,
Yes.
and courage to be able to stand up against these thugs and thieves. Now, that's asking a lot of people who are, wanting to please and wanting to be good and wanting to just go along with their life and not be bothered by these trivial things. But, but these trivial things are representing our freedom.
Yes, they're
Right.
not trivial at all.
Let me give advice to
Right. No, I know.
let me give my advice to those people. Go out and get as many shots as you can, okay? Because we don't need you. I'm dead serious about that. If people don't have enough guts, enough gumption, enough honor, enough of respect for themselves, okay? They don't deserve to be in this country. They don't deserve to even exist in this country. This country was founded upon freedom, okay? And it was founded by people who fought for that freedom. Yeah, there are a lot of problems in the administrations. We talked about that before, but the bottom line is, this is a country that was brought into existence by a ragtag army, and then the people forgot it. They forgot about their freedom. They forgot about their liberty. So we have to get back to it. And those people who are not going to get back to it, not interested in it, want to get the flu shots, go get the boosters, keep going. Okay.
Whatever you want to do, it's your choice. What we're trying to say, and I think you totally get it, you're playing devil's advocate here, is that what we're facing as a people requires us all to step up to be our highest and best self. And at this point, that means being the best American citizen you can be, because it's our right and it's our duty to keep our government on the straight and narrow. We have failed that. We let them stray into corporate land. And because most people didn't realize it when it happened, it's gotten to be a monster. And we have to get that monster out of our country so we can reclaim our natural rights And we can have a governance of, by, and for the people through the Constitution. That's what the whole thing was about. And our founders, they made a lot of sacrifices to give us a free country. But we've basically been very disrespectful of that. Because as you say, people want to please, they want to do the right thing, they don't want to get in trouble, they don't want to rock the boat too far. So they accept more and more restrictions, limitations. And so one day they wake up and they have absolutely no rights at all because, oh my goodness, somebody stole our Constitution, and who can I call for help? Nobody. Zippo.
So,
If we don't stand up now, we're not going to get another opportunity ever. Earth will never be a free planet again, ever. I cannot emphasize that enough. And that is why we did the affidavit. We started talking about the affidavit. I'm going to get back to that a little bit because it's important for people to know that this is a tool that they can use to redress their grievances, whether it's to somebody in a government office or whether it's to a job provider who is trying to impose something unlawful upon the people to compel them to take a jab that is, in the kindest way, questionable, and in the most honest way, lethal. That's going to impact them for the rest of their natural lives, which could be very short, or lose their jobs. That's a decision that no decent person should ever have to make, but that's what's being asked of them. And it's all based on a house of very ugly, dark, and fraudulent cards. So in order to oppose that and to do so in a way that's officious, the affidavit is the best way to go about this because it presents information to the government officer or to the job provider that basically states this whole thing is a fraud. And it does so with numerous facts that can be checked and verified, supporting that it's not beneficial, it's not safe, indicating it's caused a lot of deaths and so forth and so on. So the person receiving this is going to go, oh my God, how am I gonna counter this? I can't rebut this because these, I know they're true and I don't want to talk about it, but so what are they going to do? They're going to say nothing. They're not going to answer. They're not going to rebut. At the very most, they might have the lawyer write a letter saying, you don't have any standing here, blah, blah, blah. To which I would say to the lawyer, buzz off, buddy. I didn't write to you. I wrote to so-and-so. And so-and-so is the one that's under the burden to respond in kind by through a sworn affidavit that's based in truth, fact, valid law, and evidence, as my affidavit is based. And if he cannot do that within so many days, as I've stipulated, he tacitly agrees with it and admits to everything I stated in my affidavit. So if it gets
fully binding upon
in
him in
any
any
court
court
without his
without his
protest,
protest, objection, and that of those who represent him.
yes, that's a very
So-
damning statement.
So if you go through the process and you write an affidavit and it hasn't been rebutted, then it's the next step is to take it to court. And you're saying that the judge would support that affidavit because it hasn't been rebutted?
Well, first of all, that wouldn't be what I do. I wouldn't go to court
Not right away.
Okay.
You might go to the next level.
Let's say we're dealing with a corporation in Worcester, Massachusetts, sake of argument, okay? Let's say the town of Worcester granted this corporation a license to operate in Worcester, Massachusetts, okay? Therefore, the corporation received its life from the county of Worcester or whatever
The
that
state or
town
whatever it
is.
was, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So since that county brought forth this corporation, all right, and the corporation has been in this county for some time, then those who created the corporation, meaning the county, have a responsibility for the actions of the corporation. That's how I look at it, okay? Therefore, I would write new presumptive, not presumptive letters, I would write new affidavits to each member of the county commission in Worcester, citing the crimes that this corporation is committing upon the people, okay? None of those fools are going to rebut. They can't rebut, okay? It's like when I said to the judge, or when Margie says to the judge, what I said to you before, 1A and 1B, you've taken an oath, you must abide by that oath, et cetera, okay? It's all based in truth, fact, law, and evidence. Everything we do is based in truth, fact, law, and evidence. Everything our opposition does is based in fraud. They don't have any truly lawful positions. They may have legal positions, but the legal positions are fraudulent because they oppose the constitutional positions. So the guys in the city council or the county commission, the gals and guys, they're gonna look at this affidavit and say, what? Such and such a corporation is doing this, it's infringing upon the rights of the people. We put the corporation in business, and we have a responsibility to protect the rights of these people. But we can't rebut the affidavit, because the affidavit is so strong and so truthful, we can't rebut it, so they don't, okay? Next, I would report all of these crimes, number one, by the corporation, number two, by the county commissions, to all the law enforcement personnel up and down the line. It would go to the county sheriff, it would go to the county DA, it would go to the county prosecutor if there is one, it would go to the state attorney general, and it would go to the US attorney in that state. All right, we're reporting these crimes to these entities, and we want these law enforcement, in quotes, law enforcement authorities to enforce the law and enforce the Constitution. Well, all of these guys are simply communist whores, okay, in a corporation of communist whores, dealing with the communist whores in Worcester. So they're not going to do anything, number one, because they can't. Number two, they can't rebut. So next, we would send all of them affidavits. They cannot rebut the affidavits. Then we take the entire matter to court. All right, so what do we have here? We have the corporation, we have the county commissioners, okay, and we have all the law enforcement personnel, all of whom, every single one of these defendants have perjured their oaths, violated the rights of the people, violated the Constitution, absolutely trashed Article 6, all right? They've committed all sorts of egregious unconstitutional actions and crimes. So we take it to the court for this reason. There is no legitimate constitutional lawful governance existent in the state of Massachusetts, okay? Now that's a big, major item for the court to take a look at. And when we go to court, we don't deal with a judge, we're dealing with a jury. So I'm not going to trust anything with the judge. We're going to hold the judge to his constitutional mandates, but we're dealing with the jury, okay? And anyone, any true American who speaks truth, who speaks of freedom, who speaks of the sacrifices of many, many people to make this a free country, okay, can empathize with the jury and get the jury to empathize with them. Now, the juries are not very bright, unfortunately. The juries can be coerced to do anything the prosecutor wants. Schmoozed, bamboozled, okay? Blindness over their eyes, all of those expressions. But an average citizen can empathize with the grand jury because he knows, not the grand jury, the jury, he knows that they're part of him because he's an average guy, and they're all average guys at that, okay? And if those in the jury can understand what this plaintiff is going through, then what jury is ever going to find for the damn communists? It's an impossibility. That's how I would do it. I'd go all in, the whole expression, the whole 9 yards. That's the way we're doing it.
You're going for trying to affect a civil remedy, because when you look for a remedy in the justice system by filing those criminal complaints to these law enforcement personnel, they wouldn't give you the time of day. So all of them had perjured their oaths, as Jack has said, and leave you no choice but to take your cases to a court, a civil court, in which you have your arguments for it. And your arguments are going to have merit because they're going to be supported by all the affidavits that you sent to all of these people, all duly sworn and notarized. And you asked earlier, and yes, an unrebutted affidavit stands as fact and truth before the court. Rules of evidence consider themselves authenticating, okay? So this is another way of supporting your arguments. In other words, when you file a lawsuit, you have to write a complaint. And in that complaint, you're going to state the causes of actions, why you brought this lawsuit to this court against these people. And you're going to state what happened to you, and in support of what happened to you and what you did, you have all of your affidavits unrebutted by these miscreants. So those unrebutted affidavits support everything that you said, and they have absolutely nothing, and you've got scads of points on your side. So the judge is going to be hard pressed to say anything to the jury. The jury is going to have to look and say, well, look, look at the scales of justice here. These guys have all this and these guys have nothing, plus they're with the system, and we don't trust the system, do we? We're going to find for the plaintiff. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine what would happen to the system? It would be like the shot heard around the world, again, only this time in a civil court.
This is,
And this is a viable possibility if it gets to that point, and it could happen all over the country.
this is one reason we're trying to get this affidavit out to as many millions and tens of millions
As
or 20s
possible.
of millions of people as we possibly can, okay? Because we would like to see actions, as I just described, take place all over the country. I mean, my God, you're going to court because there is no lawful, legitimate, constitutional governance in the state of Massachusetts by which the citizens can get
Just remedy.
just remedy for constitutional violations committed by those who were sworn to uphold the Constitution. Can you imagine what a position that would be in one case? What if there are 5,000 cases
Or 50,000 cases.
all across
See
the
where we're
country?
going here?
Yeah.
Could bring the house of cards crashing down.
And so I'm sitting here and I'm making a list of the steps, and I'm someone who takes action, and I'm a doer, and but I feel overwhelmed by what's involved. That the idea of writing to all those county commissioners and as well as the corporation, and then to all the law enforcements, and then and then to basically to follow up with all of that and all the steps. I mean, it's not what I've been taught to do. I've been taught to sit back. I've
Yes,
been taught to say, well, you just tough it out, or you take action and you hire an attorney that's a bar attorney who is in cahoots with the entire illegal court system.
absolutely.
And so when I start peeling the layer off that onion, I go, well, what better thing can I do with my time than to write yet one more letter to one more person and get that notarized and send that out and get involved in a system that is darn empowering, because the system otherwise is destroying us.
Yes,
Yes,
100%. And if we don't step up, if we don't engage, if we don't take these affidavits forward every time we are being egregiously affronted, when our rights are being destroyed, then we're a part of the illegalities.
Yeah,
We're a
correct.
you're complicit in your own destruction. And
We
this is
are.
one of the things that the people need to recognize. This is what we emphasized when we gave the seminar last weekend, because we want people to realize that we've all been trained to be passive and silent. And our silence is our acquiescence to whatever these miscreants do to us. Oh, okay, what are you going to do? You can't fight City Hall and all that nonsense. We're saying, yeah, you can. We've done it, and we've won because we held them to the supreme law of the land. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Remember, you start out with one affidavit to one individual who has individual rights. When that individual fails to rebut, then you go to the supervisory and oversight personnel of that particular individual. Now, if it's a corporation, maybe it was your boss or the guy that had your office that told you have to do the jab or you're fired, okay? Or you have to get tested every week or whatever. And so you write to him and you say blah, 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 blah. And he doesn't rebut because he doesn't know what the heck to do. Then you go above him. Maybe you go to the CEO and the president and the board of directors. And you can even go to the stockholders if you wanted to take it to the end of the, if you're public, okay? Once you've done that, you put everybody on notice. You guys are wronging me, and I'm perfectly within my rights to seek remedy against the wrongdoing. Now, they're not going to want this, because what if hundreds of their employees do the same thing? All of a sudden, they're going to say, gee, maybe we don't have to enforce that right now. Why don't we wait till we get more paperwork? They'll find some way to shuffle out of it. And for most people, that's good enough, because they didn't want the job in the first place. They want to keep their job. So that's one way of looking at it. Then when you go to the fact that virtually every form of government in this country at every level, whether it's federal, state, county, or local, is full of communists, whether they know it or not, because they're enforcing and imposing communist policies. And you are, as a citizen, affronted by this, because you don't want to live in a communist country. You live in a constitutional republic. You're a free being. You have rights. And these people are supposed to uphold your rights and make sure that they are never abridged or limited or restricted or taken away. So you're perfectly within your rights to notify them of somebody's egregious actions. Let's say some person is in a supermarket and they're trying to buy groceries and they didn't wear a muzzle because they know they have the right not to. There's no law that says they have to. And some bonehead calls the sheriff, and the sheriff sends his deputy out, and the deputy arrests the person. Well, that person who was arrested should be writing an affidavit to the deputy that arrested him, and then up the chain to the sheriff, okay? And possibly to the county commissioners, whoever, right up the line to let them know that those rights have been violated. And they're not going to sit back and say, oh, okay, I'm not going to be passive. I'm going to let you know you violated my rights. So you perjured your oath and you vacated your office when you committed that action. And you invoked the self-executing sections 3 and 4 of the 14th Amendment, which essentially say that any public officer who's taken an oath and who then takes actions that perjure that oath in any way, that violate the Constitution in any way, vacates his office upon the commission of that act, and he forfeits his salary and his pension and any other benefits of that office. That's a scary thing to a guy that's been a lifelong public servant, who's on the gravy train, who does little or nothing for the money he gets every week. Okay? That scares them. You know what? Now, when you go to their superiors and you tell them that an underling has acted in this way, has violated your rights, they don't want to be held responsible for what some underling did. So often what they'll do is they'll kick the guy out of office and, okay, we're done. We got rid of Joe, and that's fine. And they think they're done. But they're not done, because they're culpable, because all of this happened under their watch. And if they don't do something to positively correct the situation and stop it, in other words, won't enforce the mandates, or will actually go after people who are enforcing unlawful mandates, turn it around, then they are guilty of also violating the constitutions and perjuring their oaths, and they're liable on the chopping block too. This is what they have to understand. There is a jeopardy involved, a legal and lawful jeopardy on their part, because they are not following the oath. But the only thing that, if people say, well, what does the oath mean? It is a sacred compact, if you will. They take that oath in exchange for the public trust. And as soon as they don't honor that oath, they have lost the public trust, and they cannot serve in office. They don't deserve to collect public funds. They cannot execute the duties of that office. It's a powerful thing. It's not a ceremonial oath. It is a solid responsibility, period.
And Margie, we're talking about sending a certified registered letter. We're not talking about sending an email, right?
Sending an affidavit, not a letter. A letter is one thing.
Right, an affidavit, but it's not through an email. We're talking about getting stamps and envelopes and a printer.
You're gonna have it notarized before a notary, and it's going to be notary stamped. You swore before that notary that this is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and ability, whatever. Okay, it's an officious, lawful, and legal document. Okay, it's serious.
Let me address a couple of positions here. You mentioned that most people hire an attorney, okay, because they think that's the way to go. It's not the way to go, for the reasons we discussed before. Plus, the attorneys are not constitutional attorneys, nor are they constitutional ordained. The attorneys were prohibited from occupying public office by the original 13th Amendment. Okay, and no attorney is licensed in this country. There is no license for attorney, because the practice of law cannot be restricted to attorneys. The practice of law is for everyone. The Supreme Court has upheld this quite a few times. So we're all entitled to law. But the way the attorneys work is that, just go by history, go by current examples, go by the current situation. They're beholden to the government for their existence, okay? So when it comes to a situation when the attorney's client is facing government is going to win and his client is going to lose. That's the bottom line. That's the way it works. If you look at all the cases prior to like 2 weeks ago, all the cases that were out there that were won, okay, for the system, attorneys handle those cases. People didn't handle those cases. They gave away the power, right?
And the end of the bar association. too.
The people have to get responsibility. The people have to know how to represent or not represent,
Speak.
to speak for themselves. It's very important, okay? Now, consider the issue. Yes, there's a lot of work involved here. I agree, totally agree. However, as you go through the levels, remember, the first level is going to the guy who violated your,
Right.
yeah, your rights. The second level is to the supervisors, okay, of that fellow. Now, if it's a corporation, you not only go to the corporate executives, okay, who are the supervisory authority for that individual who was first written an affidavit. You go to the county in which the corporation is located,
State
and
records
you write to
license.
that county or that state, okay? Now, in court, you have payback, okay? You have feedback. You have your opponent saying, no, I didn't do this, no, I didn't do that. You file a motion to dismiss, right? The guy, your opponent, is going to come back with all sorts of nonsense. You are in a contest of arguing the law back and forth. However, in every step of this transaction, 1 through 5, all right, there is no opposition. Zero. None. Think about it. You're writing affidavits. There's no opposition to those affidavits. They don't respond. So when you go through all the levels, no one has ever responded. And the only lawful thing that can rebut an affidavit is another affidavit based in truth, fact, law, and evidence that lawfully rebuts the first affidavit. There's nothing to rebut any of these affidavits. So yes, it takes a lot, but you're not facing any rebuttal. All you're doing is going through the methods and you're building your case because of no opposition. So consider that as well.
Well, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It does require some effort, but it's not rocket science. It's straightforward. And most people should be able to articulate what happened to them. And we simply have to cite the unconstitutional actions that were committed against them and how those actions harmed them. It's really not that difficult. And how their rights were violated, and they can specify what rights and where they're secured in the Bill of Rights. Really isn't that complicated. It might be a little
Very simple.
daunting to think about, but when you start to actually put the process together, it's really quite simple, but it's powerful.
Well, I'll work to get a link to be able to post your affidavit on this interview, and so that people can take a look at that. Are there other places on your website perhaps where they can read an affidavit to get a sense of what they look like, so that
I'm trying to have an affidavit put up. I don't know if our web guy has been able to do it yet because he's been pretty slammed. I will find out and I will let you know so that you can direct that in that way. In the meantime, they can email us at takebackourrights@yahoo.com. takebackourrights@yahoo.com.
and that's an
you say
S
that-
on rights. Take
Yeah,
back
rights,
our
plural.
rights,
Rights,
plural,
yes,
at
plural.
yahoo.com.
They can
Right.
ask us for the affidavit regarding the mandate, and we'll know what they mean, and we'll just send it out to them with a little verbiage to give them a little insights, and they can take it from
And
there.
our website is citizensoftheamericanconstitution.net. Citizensoftheamericanconstitution.net. Now, we'll be glad to send out the affidavit to people who write for us. We'll also be glad if the people want to send them the synopsis of the seminar material. It's about 125 pages, it's pretty voluminous. But if they really want to get into how to protect your rights and how to defeat government, we'll be glad to send out that report as
A
well.
lot of information in there about the way judges operate, the way prosecutors do, what attorneys claim and what they do, and some things that maybe the average guy didn't know before, which might help him make a decision to not engage an attorney when he is much better off speaking for himself.
Now, let me go back to one crucial position here. The federal government is forcing the corporations to obey the unwritten order of the federal government, okay? That's an insane situation. But as I explained before, who owns the corporations? The government is heavily invested in corporations. So who really controls the corporations?
I think the accountants control.
Yeah,
pretty
overall, at the top, yes, I would say.
In
so.
cooperation with the government. So you've
Well,
got
I
the
think-
government here.
I think that I think the accountants own the government and run the
Pretty
government.
much,
Yeah,
yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the big picture,
So
absolutely.
you really have two tiers of one control mechanism. So you've got the government, you've got the corporations, okay? Then you got the workers of the corporations. Well, what the government is doing is unlawfully requiring the corporations to enforce government edicts, unwritten, unconstitutional government edicts upon the citizens. It's basically get this jab or get fired. Well, what the corporations are doing is really putting all of their attorneys at risk of possible death or possible permanent injury. Not everyone is going to die immediately. Not everyone is going to have a permanent injury immediately. But over time, over a few years, most of those people will be gone. That's the risk the government wants its employees to take. No rightful government, no government of right deals with that position. And no corporation that deals in any aspect of honor or decency would require that of their employees. So the employees must understand if they're going to conform with what the government and the corporations want, they're taking the risk of killing themselves or having permanent injury for the rest of their lives, which in part is a genocidal program orchestrated by this government, enforced by the corporations. It's insane.
It is madness.
Well, it's total madness, and we can take a look at those who are perpetuating this, and there is not, it doesn't appear to be a true human behind that.
No, definitely not.
Not because that is not, as you say, Jack, honorable. There's nothing
There's no
about
compassion. There's no compassion at
No
all.
no
So right away, one has to understand that, compassion is actually a very human trait. And without compassion, then you have to look elsewhere. It's not human driven. Right now, it's being run by AI, but there's something else that's programming the AI, and it's not human.
That's right. And from that other standpoint too, if we start to look at and accumulate the deaths that are happening by pilots who have
Yes,
getting the injection
yes,
and start recording those crashes, it
Yes.
becomes a very serious circumstance.
I think you're going to hear more of that. I think people are going to start coming forward as they observe things. I think more people are going to give witness to that
Yeah.
because they're recognizing just how serious this is.
Let's take a look at it from this position. The airlines are saying all passengers who fly in this airline must have the jab. Okay, they must have the jab. All pilots, all stewardesses, stewards
Whatever.
must have the jab. Okay, so you get a plane, 220 people. You got a pilot, you've got a co-pilot, and then you've got the stewardess. Okay, the pilot dies. All right, co-pilot dies. What happens to the plane?
Use your
You know,
imagination.
Is this possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Okay? If a co-pilot sees his pilot die, what's going to happen to the co-pilot? He's going to freak out. He could have a heart attack himself and die right there and then.
Mhm.
Who's going to fly the plane? Now, one company, I forget which one, I think it was Southwest, offered free flights to passengers who know how to fly planes.
Oh,
Why do you think
why
they're
do you think they
doing
do
that?
that?
Would you want to fly in any of these planes today? I wouldn't.
Well, no, I have made a very clear decision that flying is not my mode of transportation these days or years.
Nor is it ours. We'll never do that again.
Yeah.
No, for many reasons, but this is just the icing on the cake, really. That means,
Well, I think that we've given our viewers, our listeners, a lot to think about. It's very weighty. It's also very freeing. It's very empowering. And so before we close, do either of you have any last words to share with the people who are listening to this amazing?
Yeah, we both do, but Margie can go first.
well, what I would say is this. It has been a weighty session. There's been a lot of discussion about things that are heavy. And they are burdensome, and they are onerous, and they are ominous. But the fact that we're talking about them should be invigorating, not frightening, because if we don't know what the nature of the problem is, there's no way we can ever come up with a resolution for the problem. So thinking about things, discussing them, and looking at new ways of approaching the old problems is our best bet. Right now, we are empowering or attempting to empower everybody in this country to recognize their personal power, their inherent political power, and to stand in honor and integrity and recognize you can't align yourself in any way with anything that is nefarious, lacks compassion, and in a governmental sense is unconstitutional. If we allow ourselves to fall down that hole, we'll never get out of it. We have to stand in our truth and honor, stand on our Constitution, and take our country back.
The people have to recognize that the governments in this country have never represented the people. The governments in this country are the enemy of the people and have always been the enemy of the people. All you have to do is look at the tax laws, the federal income tax, the state income tax, the corporation tax, the sales tax, the tax on goods and services,
And on and on.
tax. I mean, my God, it's unbelievably bad. And this is cutting into the money that the American people have to spend, but that's only one part of it. When all of these governments steal the rights of the people, dump on the Constitution, do not allow due process of law at all, then you're living in a slave state. So if you're living in a slave state and you finally figure that out, and just because you don't see bars in the window doesn't mean you're not living in a slave state, okay? Like I said before, this is not really the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is the land of the free and the home of the slave. So when you figure that out, then you can figure out that no one is going to help you but you, and maybe some of your compatriots, maybe some of the people who agree with you and see the way out. And the way out is by and through the Constitution that was devised by our forefathers. They're very bright men, okay? Some were not so good, but a lot of them were. We established the nation. So the people have to recognize the realities in which they live. They have to recognize who their friends are, and they have to recognize who their enemies are. And their enemy is definitely all government in this country, federal, state, and local. So the affidavit is a very good way to handle any problem. All of the problems we've had for the past 70 odd years, we and our people, that is, were handled by affidavits with a tremendous success rate. Success rate. I'm getting tired, excuse me. A very successful rate of close to 100%, if not 100% over those years. I mean, no one else has done this. No one else in the history of the country has done this. So if we base ourselves in the authority of the Constitution, we can win. So let's all work together and try to achieve.
Very fine. Well, we're all sharpening our pencils and gathering our writing tools, and we'll contact you, and so appreciate that you are offering us this opportunity to exercise our freedoms through affidavits and learning how to stand up against these unlawful acts and all of this, all these illegalities we're confronted.
You're very welcome.
And our thanks to the people who are picking up on these methods and using them.
Yes.
Because without the people, we couldn't do anything. So
That's right.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.